What's up, Stick Library? Pat Petrillo here, and I'm really pleased to be presenting these online lessons to you. And in this series, we're going to be covering a wide variety of things, all of which are featured in my book and DVD called Hands, Grooves, and Fills. And we're going to do a lot of examples from this book and DVD package today. So let's get started. The first thing I think we want to focus in on is our bass drum. And I'm going to address a little bit about my personal philosophy of playing the bass drum. We know that there's a couple different ways to play. There's the heel down method, and there's also the heel up method. I prefer heel up for most R&B, pop, rock, groove type of scenarios that I usually play. And the way I approach my bass drum is I'm up on the ball of my foot, not my toe, mind you, but just up on the ball of my foot, and I leave the beater on the head. That's my starting point and my ending point. And some people call it burying the beater, but I don't really mind that because I like the nice punchy sound that I get from the bass drum when I do that. So whether I'm playing quarter notes or eighth notes, every time I play, I'm really articulating those notes and I'm getting separate lifts. Now, especially with 16th notes, this comes in handy. I really want to articulate those two notes. What I don't want to do is slide my foot, because then you have really no control over the bass drum, like this. Or any variation like that. So sliding is not really a very advantageous way to play your bass drum. So I do like to articulate simply lifting from my knee and punctuating those notes. So the way to develop your timing and your groove is to play a series of rhythms on your bass drum. And I have written a bunch of these different rhythms with play-along tracks for you. And what we're going to do is play these different bass drum rhythms, and then to develop our coordination or our groove variations is to play different things with our hands. Okay, so we're going to start with quarter notes on the hi-hat, 2 and 4 on the snare, then we'll go to eighth notes, 16th notes. All the while, we're going to keep that same rhythm on the bass drum, and we're just going to change up what we do with the hands. So that'll give you a lot of different groove variations, really good coordination, and the whole thing is you want to work on your timing and your spacing and your accuracy of the notes. That's really, really important. So even if you do it 2 or 3 times very well, the whole point is to be able to do it for 5 minutes at a time, really consistent without any breaks. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to play the first track, and when you hear the rhythm, you're going to hear that my bass drum goes right with the bass line, and all the parts are locking up to that eighth note rhythm. So this first groove is all about eighth notes. Okay, so we're going to play through this track with quarters on the hi-hat, and we're going to play the bass drum rhythm. Okay? So here we go. All right, so there's our first track. Quarter notes on the hi-hat playing the same eighth note type rhythm on the bass drum repetitively to develop that timing and coordination. Let's try that same track again. We're going to go to eighth notes on the hi-hat. Okay, here we go. Okay, so hopefully you were focusing in on that bass drum, right? As I was playing the bass drum, you noticed I was leaving the beat around the head and each note was very consistent, lifting right from my knee. Okay, let's change it up one more time and let's add alternating 16th notes on the hi-hat. Okay, you notice that all I'm doing is 2 and 4 on that snare, trying to develop that nice solid pocket. Okay, here we go. All right, now we're going to get the left foot involved with the right foot. Now here's my approach about balancing my feet. I play my left foot just like I play my right foot. So I'm up on the ball of my feet, sort of like I'm running in place, okay? I don't play them heel down, I play them heel up. So I'm playing one foot against the other. So one thing you can practice would be to play different rhythms with your bass drum over quarter note on the hi-hat. Many people do eighth notes. I like to do quarter notes. It's just a little bit more difficult to do. So here's how you can practice that. So as you can see, I'm playing one foot against the other. I'm trying to stay grounded, trying to stay as flat on the ball of my foot as possible. Okay, so now let's play this groove one final time. And let's go eighth notes on the ride, quarter on the hi-hat, 2 and 4 on the snare. Here we go. Okay, so I threw you a curveball. You see that I kind of added a little bit to the cymbal ride. I went to the and on the bell. Okay, that works really well when you're doing quarter notes on the hi-hat. That contrasts with the and on the bell. And that seems to add a little bit more flavor to the groove. Okay, so now let's do a little bit more syncopated bass drum groove. What we're going to do now is work on our 16ths on the bass drum. And that would be any 2-note combination or double note combination that sounds like this. Okay, And any possible combination, starting the 2/16ths on the downbeat, perhaps starting them on the second 16th note or the last 16th note going into the next beat. Many multiple combinations of 16ths that we're going to use in this next play-along example. Okay, and once again, we're going to start with quarters on the hi-hat, 2 and 4 on the snare, and we're going to play a funky syncopated 16th note rhythm on the bass drum to develop that coordination and timing. Here we go. Okay, that's pretty syncopated. That's pretty much every 16th note combination that there is. But you can see I'm still keeping that same approach to that bass drum. Lifting my leg, trying to articulate both notes. I'm going to reinforce this. I'm not doing this. No, don't do this. Ready? Ultimately, it's going to lead to inconsistency. The best way to sound really consistent is to articulate those notes. Okay, now let's do the same process. We're going to do eighth notes on the hi-hat. This time we're going to combine 2 of them. Let's do eighth notes on the hi-hat. About halfway through, I'll switch to 16ths on the hi-hat. Same rhythm. Here we go. All right, so that's a little bit more challenging to play 16th notes here and keep those 16ths on the bass drum. So you could practice stuff like this to work up to that. Try this out. So the whole idea is to try to do as many coordinated rhythms as you can between hi-hat and bass. And I think that'll help you out. Okay, now let's add that other element of the hi-hat left foot on quarters, eighth notes on the ride, same track. And I will probably go to the ands on the bell as well. Here we go. Okay, so you can see that what I was doing was keeping that hi-hat nice and firm, okay? One other thing I want to mention about the hi-hat. I see a lot of guys and students in master classes and clinics that I do around the country, when they use their hi-hat, they only open it like this much, okay? And one of the things I learned a little later on in my drumming career was you really need to keep that hi-hat open in order for you to control it. So I would say a good width would be almost half of your index finger, okay? So you really want to keep that hi-hat nice and open, because when you lift, you never want the hi-hat to bounce up and hit the clutch. So I have plenty of room for the hi-hat to lift. Okay, so I always feel like I'm grounded, okay, with my feet. So hopefully this first little groove section in developing your bass drum technique and your approach will help you with your coordination, your timing, and just make your bass drum sound really consistent, because ultimately that's what we want to do. All right, see you next lesson.